Soundstripe.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mummy Brain Revisited. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Joe Lonstein as we discuss a recent paper we published in the Journal of Neuroendocrinology investigating how a specific probiotic may alter the maternal brain. This article is published as part of the Parental Brain Special Issue in the Journal of Neuroendocrinology, JNE, where we're exploring the neuroscience of parenting with groundbreaking research from leading experts around the world. JNE is owned by the British Society of Neuroendocrinology with an impact factor of 4.1 and a site score of 7.9. It is the go-to international journal for the latest breakthroughs across the full spectrum of neuroendocrine research, spanning everything from fundamental mechanisms to clinical breakthroughs. Check out the journal website for more information and stay tuned for more episodes from the Parental Brain Special Issue at Mummy Brain Revisited. It's great to see you, Joe.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm glad we can talk about it today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It was a really fun study, or a couple of studies that we've done. So today we're talking a little bit about some work we have on a specific probiotic and how it can affect the gut and the brain and the gut microbiome in animal models during pregnancy and the postpartum period. Maybe, Joe, why don't you tell me what you remember about how we actually even got started in this area of research?
Yeah, I think you had known that Bank Geneva was providing grants for nutrition-related research, and they're based in Europe. So I remember you had mentioned it first, and then we were thinking about, would it be possible? Could we do something together and start exploring the relationship between the gut and maternal behavior and then the effects of giving a probiotic in the rat model?
But yeah, this rings a bell. And we applied for this grant from Bank Geneva, which is a nonprofit organization, and we were fortunate to get awarded funding to do the research. One thing I remember is that we proposed to use this one probiotic, this HN001, but then we got the money and we actually didn't know exactly where we could find it. And I remember this was a bit of a scramble. You can't just buy it on Sigma or something. I was like, what do we do now? But this is when we teamed up with Fonterra in New Zealand.
Yes. And it was important to get that one specific one because it wasn't that we could just substitute any, because part of the goal of the project was to model a study that had actually been done in women that had given specifically this HN001 during pregnancy and early postpartum to see if it affected their mental health. So if we were going to do this, we wanted to do it specifically with that particular probiotic and not some mixture that you could just buy at the grocery store or on Amazon or something.
Yeah, and this is interesting because I think it was also a learning curve for us, right? Because we just kind of were delving into the probiotic world and then realizing that it is quite diverse, all the different probiotics, and they have different actions. And this was what, over 5 years ago. In the past 5 years, we've really seen a lot more information come out and research in this area. But we were kind of, starting from scratch, literally. There was one paper, and there's still really very few papers looking at the specific strain of, at the time it was Lactobacillus rhamnosus, HN001. And it's in fact from dairy products. So it's not something we produce naturally in our gut. So it's a product that's from dairy products, but has been shown to be beneficial in many different areas of child development, or not many, a few. But when we started, there was only that one paper looking at maternal mental health. So why don't you tell us about our first study?
Yeah, so the first study, and this was the major study that we proposed for that Bank Geneva grant, was a study where we were chronically giving HN001 in drinking water to female rats throughout pregnancy and the early postpartum period. And they would get it passively. And then we also had another manipulation in the groups, is that half the females in each of those water groups got chronic variable pregnancy stress, because one of the things about the probiotics is that some humans will take probiotics just to supplement their diet. But in the context of mental health, most of those people are stressed, right? So it probably is important to give the probiotic in under some conditions of stress. So half of our animals had daily stressors, moderate to mild stressors, not particularly severe stressors. And then they were allowed to give birth, and we studied their anxiety-related behavior. We looked at an array of monoamines in the brain sites that were involved in maternal caregiving and affective behaviors. And interestingly, we found very similar to what had been reported in women a couple of years earlier was that anxiety-related behavior in our HN001 treated dams was in fact lower than the controls. It didn't require that the females had pregnancy stress. It was any female that got the probiotic treatment. A little bit of a surprise was related to the maternal caregiving behavior because we found that we didn't know what to expect, but I would have thought maybe it would improve maternal behavior or have some type of beneficial effects. I think the consensus of what we found is that it actually created more heterogeneity in the maternal behavior. The dams were definitely maternal. Nobody was neglectful at all. There was more day-to-day heterogeneity in what they were doing with the pups. There was more behavioral switching in the probiotic treated dams. The other thing that we found was that it had widespread effects on brain monoamines, so serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, both in terms of the tissue levels of those monoamines, as well as the metabolism of those monoamines. And those effects were also quite heterogeneous. Like in some brain areas, it decreased it, it increased it in other areas.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're going to jump into the paper because this is the collaboration with Journal of Neuroendocrinology. So, this paper was kind of the basis for a paper that we recently had published in the special issue on the parental brain. And so, this is where we had some resources left over, and we were curious about whether or not there's an effect of the probiotic or specific to reproductive experience. So is it something that we see in moms, or is it something that we see in virgin females? And we took this in a different direction because we looked more at the hippocampal plasticity, which is where I do a lot of my research specifically.
So we were lucky because we did the first study and we had some resources remaining. And Bink was excited to have us do a follow-up, which was really great. Because we were able to use the same HN001 probiotic with almost the same paradigm to be able to chronically have the dams ingested in their drinking water. And in this case, look at something that you've spent a lot of time invested in over the years, which is looking at neuroplasticity in the hippocampus. And the results were that, yes, it affected it in some ways related to whether the females were pregnant and postpartum. Yeah.
I'm just going to walk us through the study in a bit more detail, though, because just to clarify the methods and the results, for the listeners out there, because this one was different because we had the virgin females that were age matched, and we had then females that became pregnant, and we exposed them either to probiotic or control in the same way. So with the drinking water in a similar way throughout pregnancy and then into the early postpartum period. So you have your four groups of animals. So they're either pregnant to become postpartum or they're virgin controls. We took fecal samples so we could look at different characteristics of some key microbiota that from the gut, or at least in the fecal samples. And we also took then their brains at the time of sacrifice, but we did an offspring retrieval test the day we sacrificed the animals. And this was on postpartum day 6 or at match time point in virgin females. And of course, the virgin females did not have any offspring retrieval test, but were treated in the same manner. So the focus was different, but we still were having those components of the gut microbiota. We looked at a couple of the key main microbiota, and then we're looking at neuroplasticity with an offspring retrieval test in the maternal animals, just to give kind of the brief once over.
And I think it's a good follow-up for our first study because while we showed that the probiotic treatment in the dams could reduce anxiety-related behavior, that focus was all on mothers in that first study. So what we didn't know, of course, from that first study was whether similarly treated nulliparous virgin female rats would also show any change in their anxiety or any other behavior from this same HN001 treatment. So this follow-up gave us some insight into that.
Yeah, and this is something that I spent some time, I mean, we both have been spent time looking at over the years as reproductive state, right? And how that is important when we're trying to understand anything in general, right? Brain plasticity,
Right.
medications, what have you, that this state, whether you're pregnant or postpartum or have had experienced parenting, can really have a different effect on brain and behavior, which I
Right.
think is
So, I mean,
really
so the,
important that we continue to look at that, right?
the second study had different measures, mostly different measures than the first study, but I think it was an important comparison between the virgins and the mothers to know with any measures in the brain differ as a result of the HN001 treatment. And again, I think those results are important. I think that it was important to demonstrate that some measures were affected by just HN001, regardless of who you were in terms of your
Yeah.
reproductive state as the rats. And then there are a couple of effects that were specific to just the mothers, but not the virgins as a result of the HN001. So again, I think it's another piece of insight into, if you feel like you want to use these supplements, it's not just going to be, oh, the supplements are necessarily good or the supplements are necessarily bad. There's all sorts of things to consider, including reproductive state. Probably also matters by sex. We didn't study that. We didn't have groups of males in either of our studies, but we probably would have found effects that were specific to males as well.
And just to give a brief overview of what we did find, we found that mothers who had been treated with the HN001 spent more time carrying their offspring in an offspring retrieval test. So they spent more time
Mhm.
picking them up and moving around the cage with them. And this seemed to be negatively correlated with Bacteriodota. So that's one of the main microbes that lives in the gut. So there was a connection a little bit there between the gut microbiota and the maternal behavior. And what was also interesting is the HN001 in the hippocampus of the mother increased the number of immature neurons in the dentate gyrus and also increased thick type microglia. So there is something about the effects of HN001 on the gut and then the brain that seemed to modify neurogenesis during this time, which was really interesting. Typically, there's this decrease in neurogenesis near the end of pregnancy and the early postpartum in the hippocampus. But if the mom was taking the probiotic, it seemed to at least have an increase at this time point. Whether or not it was increased throughout or it just shifted the timing of the effect and what this
Mhm.
actually means is something that would need to be investigated. But then in all females, we saw that the HN001 females, there was an effect on the Bacteriodota. Again, that there are fewer post-mitotic immature neurons. There was a decrease in the density of synaptophysin in the CA1, and this is in the hippocampus. And then there were changes in again, an increase in the thick type microglia. So there are a few effects that were specific to the mothers in terms of the neurogenesis in the hippocampus and, of course, the maternal behavior. And then overall, there seemed to be also these effects in the females that were treated with the HN001. So there's a reproductive
More broadly,
state
right,
and an HN001 effect kind of thing or interaction.
right,
But we still have many questions, I think, to have answered. But I think for me,
right.
what I like is that this shows that something we can get over the counter, a probiotic, could be in some cases beneficial for certain things like symptoms of anxiety. But like you said, we also have to remember exactly what they're doing in terms of other behaviors or other symptoms. And like anything, even medications can also, of course, have all sorts of different side effects. But I think what's hopeful for me is that we can explore different probiotics as a potential treatment or intervention to improve mood, not to treat major depression, but as an option, we can start to explore these options for moms and hopefully find something that's more specific to certain symptoms of depression or anxiety that many women struggle with in pregnancy and postpartum. But we need more research.
Yeah, absolutely. And also to know, is it specific enough? And can it be
Yeah.
specific enough to what you want to target without affecting brain systems that affect other things that you may not want to be targeting?
Yeah.
I think that is, I mean, we have no insight into that, but I think our both studies indicate that that is something that's going to be important to know about before this is really an effective or really useful avenue to go down. I think it's just in its nascency right now.
This is also some of the very beginnings of the research, I would say, or it's the start of really researching the maternal gut microbiome brain axis. We haven't really been looking at it at all specifically. So here we're showing like, yeah, definitely you can do something to the gut and it's going to do something to her brain and behavior. And now the next steps are what exactly can we do and can we tailor it then to make it actually beneficial for the mother? If we modify the gut, can that be healthy for her and the developing offspring and in different situations? But there's a huge gap in the literature, I think, with regards to the gut-brain axis. And when it comes to maternal health, we almost know nothing.
Right. We also don't know very much at all in the work in the studies in humans also is really just emerging on this, is that which probiotic is the most useful. I mean, we used one that was shown in humans to reduce anxiety in mothers, which was our goal to model in a rat. But why that one? Is it better to use other probiotics? Is it better to use cocktails or mixtures of probiotics? I think that there's some literature showing that that may be useful too. I think that the field is really in
its infancy, Joe. Let's
exactly using the context, right? It's in its infancy. And I think that there's a tremendous amount more work, like you said, that needs to be done to understand how and when and for whom these probiotics could be useful in a way that's useful for mental health or other symptoms. Because of course, they're also taken as supplements for just general gut health for people that have IBS and other gut issues.
Yeah.
I think it's exciting to suggest that they could be useful, but I think there's so much information that we don't know about if they're selectively useful, that I think which will be important to know in the future.
Yeah. So for the listeners out there, if you want to do probiotic research, there's a world open to you when it comes to maternal health in general, not just mental, but even physical. We just don't know enough about it. And it's a great opportunity to try to figure out how we can target the gut to improve health overall in motherhood. So hopefully there'll be more and more research coming out on this in the coming years.
Questions, comments, suggestions, get in touch at Mommy Brain Revisited on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. You can also contact me on my website at jodipawluski.com. That's JODIPAWLUSKI.com. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Soundstripe.